Are you ready to rise up from the ashes of the dumpster fire that was 2020 and claim your right? Or are you still wandering around a little shell-shocked in a daze, contemplating those smoldering ashes? Perhaps you're like most of us, and you fall somewhere in between those extremes. Wherever you are on that spectrum, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the very first episode of the Claim Your Right podcast for the Mama Writer Wannabe. I'm Christine Holloway, and I'm really happy to be talking to you today. Before we start out, I just have a couple disclaimers. The first is that I have every intention of making this podcast as honest and authentic and as real as possible. But on the flip side of that, it's probably going to be messy and far from perfect. But that's okay. Because perfection is the lie we tell ourselves to keep us from doing what we need to be doing. And that includes writing. I also want to say that starting out, this podcast isn't going to follow the prescribed podcast scheduling. I am going to go into a little bit about myself, but I want to dive into getting right into what the purpose of this podcast is, and that is getting as many of you writing as quickly as possible. As writers, we have certain neuroses and idiosyncrasies that set us apart in the creative worlds. Whether we're introverts or suffering from a severe case of imposter syndrome, being a writer can be a hard life, especially for one who's not writing. When you throw motherhood on top of that, it can just be chaos. But I'm here to tell you that it's the writing that can ultimately save us. Now here comes that honesty part I mentioned. You're going to have to actually do the writing. And we are going to get into all the things. But first, let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I'm a single mom of an 8-year-old going on 14-year-old boy. And we have a almost 2-year-old miniature poodle. I have a bachelor's in business administration with a concentration in management. And I have a master's degree in legal studies. And you are probably wondering why I'm doing a podcast about writing. And the honest truth is I've been a writer since I was in 3rd grade. And I wrote my first chapter book, which will probably and hopefully never see the light of day. But writing has been the passion of my soul since I can remember. But for a long time, writing was something I hid from the rest of the world, only sharing it with people that I trusted implicitly. And it was also something that the world told me was just a hobby and something that I needed to do after I had done all the real jobs and, all the expectations that the world puts on you or that we put on ourselves because we believe what the world says. So I had 2 short stories traditionally published, one in 2012, the year my son was born, in 2012. And then I had another one published in 2015 after we had moved to the Tampa Bay area, one of my lifelong dreams. I grew up in the Midwest, spent my 20s in the South, and went back to the Midwest and finally made it all the way down to Florida. And I also tried my hand at self-publishing. All of these were under a different pen name. They were categorized as very adult romance. And it was another way of me hiding my writing. Writing something that I didn't necessarily want to put my name on, that I couldn't exactly share with everyone, allowed me to, again, just play at it. And so I wasn't very successful, obviously, because I didn't dive in like I should have. I didn't claim my right. And then enter 2020, stage left. I won't go into everything that was 2020 because we all have our 2020 stories. But I'd like to start out my 2020 story with something that happened before all the chaos ensued. So at the beginning of the year, I found a new primary care physician, which had been quite a struggle. I've had multiple health issues over the last 3 years. And so finally I had found I had seen lots of specialists, but finally I found a primary care physician that I liked. And I was in the room with a nurse while she was doing the intake, all the intake questions. And I was giving her, just the laundry list of everything I had been going through. And I remember finishing it up with, but 2020 is going to be my year. 2020 is, when it's going to happen. And she looked at me and she gave me this sideways glance. And her tone was so obvious, maybe is the word I'm looking for. But she looked at me and she said, well, you just have to claim it. And it was like a bell went off in my head. I was like, you're right. It's up to me to actually do what I need to do to make this happen. But then, of course, life goes on, lunches need to be made and your kid needs to have clean clothes to go to school in, pickup lines at the school, and et cetera, et cetera. Life happens. Time to walk the dog. And of course, I forgot, you fall back into the old routines. It's very easy to fall back into the old routines, and it's very easy to become distracted. That's one thing we're really going to talk about in this podcast, about making the choice to put down those distractions. And then, of course, the coronavirus hit and the lockdowns and wiping down groceries and stocking up the groceries and all the things. And that was certainly a difficult time, virtual learning. That was quite an ordeal. But then about a month into that, I remembered what she had said to me. And I'm sure all of you went through your own personal taking stock of your life and what's important and priorities. I know we all did a lot of that this year. And I just decided that writing needed to be my priority. It needed to be what I did. I needed to reclaim the writer within. I needed to be the writer that I was. And it was the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. So I dusted off the first section of a story that I had previously started, which is on the completely opposite spectrum of what I had been published in. I went for clean romance, clean historical romance, Western, and decided that this section of the book that I had rewritten several times, because that's where that perfection comes in, I decided that I needed to just get it out. And so I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote. And from beginning of May until the beginning of November of 2020, I wrote and self-published 3 novels. And it was an amazing experience. But what was most enlightening, if you will, it wasn't the awesome feeling of having my stories available for sale on Amazon. It wasn't the amazing feeling of having people read my stories, seeing that people were reading my stories, that I had no idea who they were, and they were enjoying them. I've gotten a couple good reviews all of that was just incredible. But the most important lessons of that experience was how the simple act of writing changed me. Writing every day, I don't want to use the word somehow because deep down I've always known this is what I've needed to do. And in the past, when I've written on a regular basis, this was proven to me, but somehow, you just forget. Life gets in the way. We get distracted. But the simple act of writing allowed me peace. It allowed me a calm with all the chaos that was surrounding me. Getting the words down on paper, even some of the, even sometimes the chapters that I didn't put in the book or, had to scrap. Like just the act of sitting down and writing was therapeutic. It was healing and it was transforming. And I became a better person. I became calmer. I was able to see things a bit more objectively. And then in turn allowed me to open my eyes, which is a whole another podcast in and of itself. But also it made me a better mother. I think it made me a better friend. I will share with you that this process of writing those 3 books brought me closer to 2 of my best friends. We started a new email thread and texting thread, and we made our own little tribe. And my one friend, who has been my best friend since grade school, since elementary school, she became my editor. And our other friend, who is a genius with graphics and audio visual stuff, she made me a trailer for my series, which is amazing. But she said I can't put it up yet because it's not quite ready. But yeah, the relationship building just coming from my writing was so awesome. I also made a brand new friend, a friend of a friend who is writing her own novel. She is a Renaissance woman. She's going to be a guest on my podcast. We've already talked about it. She is a statistician, actually, and has just completed her first novel in historical romance. So yeah, the community building around my writing was such an unexpected, wonderful surprise. But after that, after the, life happens and my friend had to go back to work. She teaches in the school, so she couldn't edit anymore. So I've decided to kind of put a pin in that series because it does not feel right continuing on without my editor being able to help me with those stories. So I have a new series idea that has been in my brain, and I'm super excited to be starting it this first of the year. So I will be keeping you updated on that. But anyway, so after I had finished the 3 stories, that's, by the end, that was in November. So, by then everything was wearing on me, as it was everyone else, I'm sure. One thing that I started noticing as I was reading the news and listening to podcasts, incidentally, I never listened to podcasts before lockdowns and quarantine. And now I can't get enough of them. I started to see that for the most part, we are constantly bombarded with everything that is wrong with this world. Everything that is wrong. It's so hard to find things that are right. The positive things that we need. We need hope. We need something to look forward to. We need promise. We need purpose. And it's so hard to find. And when you do find it, it's like finding a needle, searching for a needle in a haystack. But then when you find it, and maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but it seems to me that when we find the things that are right, we are told how they're right. It breaks the cardinal rule of storytelling, which is show, don't tell. Storytelling is one of the fundamental aspects of humanity. It is how we learn. It is how we shape our worldviews. I don't want people to tell me, I mean, I do. There's a time, absolutely, there's a time and a place for the intellectual. But more than telling me about a world of freedom, more than telling me about how X, Y, and Z is going to solve our problems, I need to be shown. I need to be immersed in it. Give me a tour. I want to see it. I want to taste it. I want to smell it. I want to touch it. I want to feel it. And I think that could be the disconnect. We need to feel it. That's how, for better or worse, for the most part, people make decisions based on their emotions. So telling somebody how X, Y, and Z can open a whole new world doesn't let them feel it on the level that they need to really care about it. Sadly, I feel that the craft of storytelling has fallen by the wayside. And then I began to think it is perhaps because there are reluctant writers, just like I was, who have talked themselves out of embracing their passions and claiming their own right. And maybe, just maybe, if I could encourage more mama writer wannabes to actually start doing what they were born to do, then there is a chance that the world could start to be that better place that all of us imagine. With that in mind, I created a writing kit to help all of you get writing. If you want to buy it, the link is on my website. I'll put everything in the show notes. I've got a low introductory price going on, but you don't have to, because I'm going to give it all away for free in this podcast. So over the next several episodes, I'm going to walk you through the process. I also have a free cheat sheet that you can download. You can get a fresh spiral notebook, which is what we used to do, for your new story idea, or a journal, or just loose leaf paper, or, the back of your kids' printed out assignments, homework assignments that they're done with. It doesn't matter what method you use. The important thing is that you start writing. One last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up. While I use and embrace the term mama writer wannabe very lovingly, I want to make something very clear. I believe that you are already a writer. Even if you've never been published, even if no one's ever read what you've written, even if you haven't picked up a pen or opened your laptop in 10 years, you are already a writer. And I have another message for you that I hope that you internalize. Your writing is legitimate and it matters. I believe that your story deserves to be told. And so now it is time to start writing, mama. Put down your need for perfection, say no to the procrastination, and pick up your pen. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, write on.